So I was at the doctor's yesterday
Again?
again. So I've done tests upon tests upon tests in the last little while for my bladder. And I know you make fun of me how much I pee, but just hear me out. They did a bladder test. I checked for diabetes. We checked the prostate, everything under the sun.
I bet that was fun.
Yeah, you know what? It tickled a little. But everything checked out good. Everything's perfect. In good health. Everything's great. And I'm told I just have an overactive bladder, which I have medication for.
Wow. So you're not nuts.
So I'm not nuts. And I thought of you in the sense of like, you ever make one of those jokes where you make a joke about somebody, you make a joke about their health, and then you find out that they actually have some really bad, terrible disease they're dying
Don't
from?
you even try to make me feel bad because I'm still going to fucking chirp you.
Well, I feel this is on the same level.
My mom in French would call you piss minute, which means you have to pee every minute.
Actually, can we play the theme song? I got to go to the bathroom.
See? Ding dong.
This is Davey the Hustle.
Or something of the sorts.
Everybody wants a piece of me. I'm a lonesome man making history. They say we're all just raindrops in a stream.
So it might actually be a little bit of fun going out with you now.
It might just be. I'm still going to use the stall. And I will say, after we aired our episode last year, which was our very first episode of me peeing in a stall and you making fun of me, the outpouring of support of grown men like myself who pee in a stall was unbelievable. It was on another level.
I guess I'm the minority now. I pee in a urinal. Oh, attaboy. What the heck are we talking about today, buddy?
Well, listen, you have a guest coming up, so I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want to have a quick chat about how to make a positive impact in the world, but also skyrocket your business by giving back.
I'm all ears.
Well, I can't see your ears. They're inside the headphones.
Yeah, all ears. Well, actually, yeah, my earmuffs.
You're all earmuffs.
I do live in Northern Ontario.
But I want to talk today about donating a portion of your sales to charity. Now, before you or anyone listening says, well, I'm just starting out or I can't afford that. Recently, I talked about marketing budgets. And guess what? This lands right in that strategy. So while the primary benefit is undoubtedly the charitable cause itself, savvy marketing of your kind giving heart can really benefit your business. And this goes for small businesses like the mom and pop shop, right up to like giant corporations like McDonald's with their McHappy Day or Tim Hortons with their Camp Day.
Yeah, like the Ronald McDonald House, man. That's fucking amazing.
Exactly. So how do you make this a win-win strategy? Well, it's easier than you think, luckily. So the first is by choosing a charitable cause that resonates with your brand and values, right? And we've talked about this a lot, where it doesn't matter who you work with or who your customers are, you have to align with the right people. So there's a genuine alignment between your business and the cause you support. It enhances that, and I'm going to say it again, humanizing factor that I always talk about. So, for example, if you run like a sustainable fashion brand, right? Whether it's t-shirts or sweaters or whatever it is, if you do a campaign where a percentage of the sales being donated are going to make a difference in supporting an environmental initiative, then that's a natural fit, right? You have to have the right fit. If you are this sustainable fashion brand and the charity you're giving to is hockey teams, it doesn't really make sense, right? It's like it doesn't align. Your customers aren't going to be like, oh, good, I'm so happy they're giving to a hockey team.
Yeah, and the first thing that comes to mind when you're talking about this stuff is what we've spoken about a million times about humanizing yourself is you have to be genuine about it too, right? If you're just going to give to it, like, to me, there's no better feeling than giving back to your community. I know it may sound cliche or fake.
No,
but
it's so true.
Like, it's rewarding, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're doing it solely to try to generate business, people will see through that shit.
Exactly.
So for sure, find a cause that means something to you, right? So that you're passionate about it.
Yeah.
For me, for the most part, it's healthcare, right?
Yeah. Because you have a friend who has a bad bladder. You're trying to keep me alive. I get it. You care about me. I love you.
Yeah. Needs medication because he can't pee at a urinal in public. You know what? All of that really triggered me devoting my my spare time to
I
healthcare.
figured.
But healthcare in Northern Ontario was challenging on a
No
good
kidding.
day, right?
Yeah,
So anyway, and I think that stemmed a lot from my upbringing and my involvement in the gym and,
for
all of
sure.
that stuff. Needless to say, you speak of the humanizing factor and finding the right cause, 100%. I've seen that where people are donating and they're doing a big brouhaha and you got social media involved and photos with checks and it's like, this guy's so fucking fake.
Exactly.
Right. So it's got to be genuine. It's got to be a cause that matters to you.
And you have to be transparent and clear. So, like, share the percentage of sales being donated.
Speaking of McDonald's, the Kirkland Lake owners started a campaign last March where every last Wednesday of the month,
Yeah,
they gave away a percentage of their sales for that day.
yeah.
They gathered up all those funds for the Blanche River Health Foundation, which is the two hospitals in Kirkland Lake and
Nice.
Englehart. And they just cut us a check for like $11,000. And they're like, we're just going
Amazing.
to start doing this annually. Right.
That's
So they're
amazing.
essentially donating $1,000 a month for very little effort. And it's great PR. They're
No
super
kidding.
nice people. They're doing it from the heart. They weren't looking for any type of media attention. We just showed up there with a camera and group
Nice.
of people to take a nice photo op. So yeah, great topic, man. I'm glad you brought that shit up.
Well,
That's
hey,
right
I
up my
try.
alley. I'm passionate about giving back to your community and being involved in your community. And
Well, for sure.
this is
And
exciting.
the big part here is getting the message out there, right?
Yep.
And when I say that, it's like, yeah, you can post a post on Facebook, but have engaging campaigns, right? So, for example, as you mentioned with McDonald's, it's like you run this limited time promotion where a percentage of your sales goes to that charity, or you encourage customers to participate by involving them in that decision making. So it's like, have a vote. What charity would you like to see us donate to? Right. And then you have your target market telling you what charities matter to them.
Yeah.
And you can look at it and say, look at this. I couldn't think of a good charity that aligned with our company, but we just had our demographic tell us, right? But the key factor here when doing all this is to maintain profitability because you need to ensure that the percentage that you're giving back to charity doesn't compromise your own business, right? So you set that donation percentage above your break even point because you need to ensure that the business remains financially viable, really. So figure out that fair percentage where you don't lose money and then you put that in your marketing budget and you use it as such. So at the end of the day, adding charitable giving into your marketing strategy is crucial for several reasons. First, as I said, it humanizes your brand. And in today's climate, that's huge, right? We know this, people are socially conscious and it's important. So secondly, it differentiates your brand from your competitors because by adding that meaningful layer to your product or service, consumers these days are increasingly drawn to companies that prioritize these purpose driven initiatives, right? People go to McDonald's or Tim Hortons. Even when they don't normally, they'll go on those special days.
Yeah. Like I'll go in and buy small cookies when I typically don't go to Tim Hortons.
Exactly.
And you know what? I love that you're integrating that as a value added to your marketing and using your budget for that, dude, because like it's so impactful to see businesses involved in their community. Like that's a turn on for me as a consumer.
For
right?
sure. For everyone.
And I consciously, I don't know if we ever talked about this as part of our marketing strategy, Darryl, but like we purposely put ourselves out there when we're promoting our involvement with certain organizations.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's not just the marketing piece where it's like, oh, look at us, we're,
Mhm.
we're involved. I keep thinking the more we can flood social media,
Yeah.
the radio, the news, whatever, to say, oh, we're fucking giving to this organization. I keep having this little like gut feeling that if we keep doing that, it motivates other people to do the same, right?
100%.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Yep.
And the other thing is the more we promote that organization, people will be reminded that that organization even exists. And sometimes it reminds
Exactly.
people how much help that organization needs because it's pretty rare that they're going to say, oh, Hepburn Productions, gave $5,000 to Joe Blow, right?
Exactly.
They're going to write an article and explain why the organization exists and what its purpose is. And
Yeah.
it kind of reminds people, it brings that organization to the forefront again to remind people that they exist. And it often reminds them why they exist because of that little blurb, that write up. Like if that organization is doing a special project, like I think the hospital again, when they did the Buy a Bed campaign,
Yeah. Yeah.
the classic resident Norm Conley, he was on every doorstep for
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I bet you 2 years.
It's awesome.
Right. But having said that is, I love that you've integrated that in marketing because it could be a really impactful way to get yourself out there, all while doing fucking good. Like people love good doers and it feels good to
100%.
be a good doer. Like
Yeah.
it's a fucking win-win. There's no loss there. And even if you have to make a little bit of sacrifice to your income, dude, like
Yeah.
it's our duty to fucking be involved in the communities where
Yeah.
we live and where our children go to school and where we seek healthcare and where we spend our money and where people spend money at our place. Like it's, I get excited about this stuff. Sorry, man.
Oh, I know. Well, that's the thing. You're contributing to the greater good, but you're also getting your product or service in the hands of people.
Fuck yeah.
What's better, putting $1,000 on your credit card for Facebook ads and people get to see a picture or a video, or you hand over that $1,000 to a charity and at the same time, your product or service is now in the hands of actual people.
You hand over $1,000 to the SPCA and there's a marketing piece on that. Now, all of a sudden, all the animal lovers are potential clients for you.
Exactly.
Right?
Talk about strategic marketing.
Do it. Hashtag call Darryl. Fucking call Hepburn Productions to help you with this shit because this stuff's important.
We'll be right back.
When I hashtag called René, I knew my future would be prosperous.
What's with the British accent?
Rich people have accents. I figured by the time that I retire, I'll have an accent too. Hashtag call René of St. Cyr Associates.
So, speaking of charities, you have a guest today.
Yeah. And it's not Charity, the stripper we saw at Brass Rail last weekend.
Ah, well, I'm out of here. I thought that's who it was.
Oh, Charity. We have an amazing guest today. I've got my good friend, John Gilmour from Canada Life.
Nice.
John is a product specialist with advanced and large cases, and he works mostly with the tax and estate planning team. So he's an amazing resource for our team, and I have a lot of respect for this guy. So I'm very happy that he agreed to join the program today.
Well, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. This is quite an honor, to be honest with you. I've, René and I work pretty closely together, and nice to meet you, Darryl. So thanks for the invite. It's exciting.
Pleasure to meet you as well. I'm excited to learn a little bit more. I know René gets the goods on this already, but I'm the regular guy, although people will argue that.
Yeah, with a man of John's stature, it's going to be difficult for us to be two goofballs today. So we're going to have to like bring our A game.
That's why I wore a bow tie today.
Yeah, there you go. So the reason that I brought the big guns into the conversation today, Darryl, is I want to talk about plan giving.
Yes.
And I think this is a topic that is becoming a little bit more prevalent in our client conversations as we're kind of dealing with, the retirement of the baby boomers, the aging of baby boomers, the wealth that they're going to pass on to the next generation. And I think this is really important for us to have this conversation, and how better to have someone who knows all of the ins and outs about this.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, when I started in this business, René, I was always interested in the insurance side, just sort of from a family background and how impactful it was. When you start to see the impact, some of the work that you do for people who just like to give, and it's not about the beneficiaries. I got into this business, and I still work in this business more and more, probably for what it does for the people who give than for the people who receive. That's really what it's about. And I think we're somewhat, we're all kind of in that milieu, whether it's you're paying it forward at, a coffee shop drive-through, or, how many people have signed their organ donor card, right? So, people are in that giving mode. And so that's what I do. I work generally in the large case market, a little bit more complex cases, generally corporate, but it could be personal as well. And the idea of plan giving is in that milieu. It's that sort of post-mortem and pre-post-mortem planning.
Yeah, that you know what, you gave me goosebumps actually, because like Darryl and I have had these conversations in prior podcasts. My older brother Dan is very religious, so he kind of brings the spiritual part of that conversation, but we get so much more reward by giving than by receiving, right? Like it's okay, you feel good when someone does something for you, but the feeling that you have for doing something for someone else is that giving piece it's a lot more impactful and a lot more rewarding, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting how many people think, well, I've got to be a Rockefeller, I've got to be part of the Bill and Melinda Gates sort of circle of friends to be able to take advantage of being impactful. And it's, you and I know that's not the case at all, right? It's interesting. There's this community just actually east of where I am here in Ottawa. And they started a little program with a number of the restaurants. And you might have heard about this where you could pay it forward. So you would buy a meal and leave the receipt on the wall, and people would come who needed a meal and they take the receipt and they go and eat, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah, it really was. There was such a take up on it. In fact, some of the other communities now also got involved. There's some south of where we are. And it was really interesting to see the impact that it had, obviously, on those people who, for you and I, we may take it for granted that, one meal a day. I mean, that's table stakes, but for a lot of people, right, that's really impactful. And so they could get one good meal a day that was paid by somebody else, and there was nothing in it for the person, obviously, who actually donated that, other than it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah,
Exactly.
your name's not on the receipt, so
No.
you're not getting credit.
Yeah.
Selflessness.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what it's all about, right? And there are some people, like, as I said, Bill and Melinda Gates, who might just take it to a different level, but most of us aren't in that milieu, right?
I'm working on
I
it
don't think Bill's listening into this podcast. Has he subscribed to the podcast yet, Darryl?
twice.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so that's and for me, that's what really triggered this side of the business, and so I started to develop that a little bit in the Quebec area, in Montreal, and dealing with people who, for instance, palliative care. I mean, when you've been impacted by somebody who's been looked after in a palliative care unit, for instance, like you look for reasons to say, I want to be able to give back to what they provided to me and to my loved ones. How do you do it? Right? I mean, how many coffee makers or how many sofas can a palliative care deal with now? But they can deal with cash. And that helps them, right? And so,
Cash is king.
yeah, it really is. And so that's where I started to really wrap up kind of the work that I did, really in being able to be that conduit between what you want to do, how do you want to impact a legacy, and then for the beneficiaries to be able to benefit from that.
So a question I have, kind of as the regular average Joe.
You're not fucking average. You're something. You're the something of the sorts.
But when I think of planned giving and we talk about donating to charity, I'm a big advocate of that. I donate myself. I know lots of my friends donate all the time. But it wasn't until recently when I spoke with René about having you on the program that my idea of giving was donating to like a coffee shop, to a cause, or sending small donations regularly to sick kids or whatever the cause may be. But what I didn't really ever think about was what's in my portfolio and how my insurance policy could make a big impact when the time comes, obviously. I honestly don't think many people know about this or really understand it. Like, a great amount of people want to do right by their family, obviously, and leave them with some sort of inheritance. But at the same time, they want to leave something to a cause or a charity that means something to them. So I guess my question here is, what's more beneficial? Me donating when I can now, or leaving, say, my large insurance policy to charity?
Yeah, it's a great question, because if, like most of us, you feel that you want to pass on a little bit of your good fortune, right? We
For
should be
sure.
valued at more than what our portfolio says we're worth, right? It's really passing on values. That's the portfolio.
Yeah.
So do you want to start to maybe distribute some of that on an annual basis just because, well, you have the ability to do that? Is it going to be impactful from you from a tax point of view? Well, somewhat. Listen, I don't think the government is ever going to sing this from the rooftops that charitable giving is the
Exactly.
best thing since sliced bread, right? I mean, every time they don't get a nickel from you, doesn't put a smile on their face, obviously.
Exactly.
But that's essentially what you're doing, right? So now you decide, like, Darryl, do you want to, be able to rob the government a little bit of change today, or is it more impactful that you do that upon your passing in what we would call sort of part of a post-mortem planning strategy, right?
Yeah.
So that does differ a little bit, right?
I've often wondered at the end of the day, and I got two amazing brains here right in front of me. Is it when we talk about dollars and cents, not talking about my portfolio, but the charitable organization, is it better for them to receive my $50 this month, and that's probably all I'm going to give for the next 6, 7, 8 months, or is it more beneficial for me at the end of the day that I'm leaving them $50,000?
Darryl,
Oh, come on, Darryl.
can't you do both?
I know.
I think it's a fair question, because it also comes down to the charity itself that you may have a real fondness for, and
Yeah.
that charity needs to eat today and continuously. So you want to be part of that and give today. And I get that. That's the way most of our smaller foundations will survive. But for long-term sustainability, we really need to be looking at those contributions that are more sustaining on a larger level, and that usually comes with insurance policies that pay out obviously at death.
Yeah.
And so the impact can be much more beneficial to make sure that that foundation is sustainable, right? And there's some other issues with, how the tax crediting works, of course. You only get a certain amount of tax crediting while you're alive versus once you've passed away. And so the government does allow some leeway to be able to basically write off your entire tax bill if you wanted at death. You don't get that advantage up front. So I might say, in all honesty, where a lot of clients I deal with will look at planning as part of a postmortem strategy because it ties into tax for them, right? Ties into, how they want to leave their legacy, who they want to leave their legacy to, and the type of tax that they're going to pay. So it's a different conversation than maybe you or I today saying, listen, I really feel for the SPCA. They're struggling. They're doing a capital campaign. They need to eat today.
Yeah. So I guess, like you say, to your point is do both.
Yeah.
Because like you say, some organizations they need to eat. So you can't forfeit your donation now because of the immediate impact that you're having.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at long-term, the old saying of short-term pain for long-term gain, your impact will traditionally be a lot larger, and your impact as a philanthropist is going to be larger if you're leaving some funds post-mortem with some proper planning.
I mean, you could take a policy today, Darryl, and you could name your favorite foundation as the beneficiary of that policy.
Yeah.
They would only see the benefits of that really upon your passing, right? So we're hoping that's going to be a whole long way down the road, but they may need that money today. And so that's kind of the compromise for them. They might say, we appreciate that, Darryl, but we kind of need that money today. Whereas other foundations will say, or other charities might say, we're good with that. We strive on these $5 and $10 million policies that pay in, even if it's 30 years, 4 years down the road. Right?
Nice.
So when you see, Mr. and Mrs. Smith's wing on the side of the hospital or on the university, you can bet that money didn't necessarily come from their pockets, right? I mean, it came from a sizable donation and in all likelihood from a policy. So we do many of those. Now, at the end of the day, just because you want to give away your cash, from an insurance point of view, you always have to remember you still have to be able to justify that amount of coverage. It is what it is. But there are a lot of clients that say, hey, listen, my kids are going to get what they get, right? René, you see this. I mean, you've got clients who have enough wealth who might say, hey, my kids will be fine and my spouse will be fine. But what can we do really to leave a legacy here and to maybe at the same time, without being selfish, what's in it for me? What's the tax advantages of doing that?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Giving less to Trudeau and more to the organization that matters to you.
Yeah. And that's, what we hear all the time is, does Justin and Doug have enough money in their pockets? And even if they don't, are they spending it correctly? So maybe I'm going to be in charge of what happens to that money. Yeah, Justin might say to you, yeah, well, your tax money goes to support, this hospital or that hospital. Well, I can't really take your word for it. Maybe I want to be in charge of that. And so this is a great way to be in charge of where that money goes. Sit down, with individuals like René and work that out. And, you get to decide now who writes, where that check is written to and who benefits from it.
And I don't know if you've noticed with the other advisors you work with, but we're seeing more and more wealth with individuals now that I have not seen. I know it comes with kind of maturity in the business and that too, but, just with, the baby boomer generation selling businesses, particularly with business owners and stuff, entrepreneurs are just retiring with an enormous amount of wealth where they have more than enough to retire, like you say, and to look after their families.
Yeah. And really, here's what I say to those clients. It's not about passing on your wealth. It's now about passing on your values. That's what happens. And when they reflect on that, they kind of go, yeah, that makes sense. I can pass on my wealth. And how many generations does it take to burn through wealth? Not many.
I'll call you Dad any day.
Exactly.
I'm in the will, right, Dad?
Yeah, maybe not. And so that's the issue, right? They realize I can leave a legacy here, right? So it's about the values that they pass on. The money will be there.
Yeah, and that you kind of get a good sense of who the person is with the organization that they end up giving to. Darryl, like you're going to give probably $10 million to like the Dance Bowl Association or something.
Actually, it's the cream that shines the pole.
Oh yeah, there you go. and a takeaway from this conversation is that if you guys ever see my name on a wing at the hospital, I'm likely dead. Probably a post-mortem donation.
Yeah. But it's interesting because when you deal with clients more and more on this level, I think, Darryl, you kind of hit on it when you said, do I do it earlier or do I do it later? If you understand where the client's values are, like it becomes clear really on what is a good strategy. Now, I often say, listen, it's really about the charity. It's what benefits the charity at the end of the day, or is it today? But the reality is, most of us who have that sort of wealth might say, well, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
And so there are some strategies to be able to say, hey, I can actually leave the same amount of assets to my surviving shareholders and be able to benefit a charity at the same time. So there's some really good strategies that involve some good planning that, if you take a couple of minutes, you sit down, you're at that stage of life where you want to look at, what does my exit strategy look like? Well, there are some good strategies that the government makes it very beneficial for you to take advantage of.
And is there anything we should be keeping in mind when selecting those charities to support? Like, I think of like red flags. Like, is there something that's going to not benefit you, not benefit them by donating this wealth?
Well, I mean, I think today you'd see people that would, there's a generation of people who will say, maybe it's all about green. Maybe it's all about sustainability or whatever the case is. And so you kind of gravitate to that side. What you might be concerned about is what happens if you give to that charity today and really you're not in love with them tomorrow. And it may not be the charity. Darryl, you might just not like the board of directors, or you might not like the path that they're going down, right?
Yeah.
So you have to kind of keep that in mind as well and say, am I getting into something here where I have the ability to say, pull the strings on this one and move it to somewhere else?
Yeah, it's kind of like this podcast.
How do I get out of this?
That is a great point, John. Actually, I totally kind of slipped my mind is that we've seen instances where, just as a loose example, you've got someone who wants to donate to, say, the hospital foundation in their community. But all of a sudden, one of their arch nemesis is now the director of that board and doesn't like the direction that they're going in. So if you've committed, a certain amount of resources, it could be out of your control if you've made that donation. But the fact remains that it could be true if you're donating, say, a $2 million policy to that foundation and you've kind of made that public to the board of directors, and all of a sudden you're backpedaling. It's like, how do you fucking deal with that commitment, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, there is a method now. There's what we call donor advised funds, and it really keeps you in control of that annual donation. So Darryl, you said, I really want to donate. I want to get a tax receipt on an annual basis, but I don't want to commit myself to one particular foundation or charity.
Yeah.
Then you can go into a donor advised funds, and it's great, right? Because now you just pool all that money and then you leave the direction in your will to say, hey, where do those funds go? Because now 40 years down the road, you might feel differently, as I said, about one charity or another. So that's another option. And we see that quite a lot.
Great question, Darryl. Look at you.
Yeah, and really, it's the tax. If you want to talk about it from a selfish point of view of what's from the tax point of view of doing it today or doing it tomorrow, generally, I'd say you're going to get a tax credit for 50 cents for every dollar you get, right? So is that going to be impactful if I'm giving $100? Well, I'm going to get a $50 tax receipt. Or if I give a $2 million policy because René wants to put a wing on the side of the hospital, he'll get a $1 million tax receipt for that. So it can be a little bit more impactful, obviously.
As a segue to that, though, when you mentioned shareholders earlier, if you do decide to give, let's say you can budget, doesn't matter if it's $1,000 a year or $100,000 a year or $1 million. Generally from your experience, would it be more beneficial to give some of your cash away, or if you have a holding company because you've sold your business and a lot of the proceeds went into your holding company, your investment corp, whatever, is it beneficial to then give it from your corporation? And what are the differences? Because you'll be educating me on this a little, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't want to get into too deeply into the tax rules, but when we look at it from a corporate point of view, generally clients that we deal with, and you might agree or disagree, René, but most of those clients, their wealth, the majority of their wealth is in their corporation,
Yep.
right? Right. So their shares may be worth $5 or $10 million, or they may be worth $2 million, but that's generally probably the majority, other than maybe right now their primary residence if they're living in downtown Toronto. But other than that, that's where their wealth is. So it's really a nice strategy to be able to say, hey, I can give my shares or a portion of my shares to a foundation. So whatever you want to call it, at the SPCA. And the SPCA obviously doesn't want shares in your corporation, but they do want cash. So you take the cash out of your corporation that has been generated from life insurance. So at the same time, when you've passed away, life insurance has gone into the corporation, and you use that money and you get those shares back from the corporation. Remember, the corporation pays no tax. So when you're giving them money, you're giving them a dividend that's tax-free. So they've got cash in their pocket, they give you back the shares. But your life insurance is also generated for your corporation, tax-free money. That's what life insurance does. Because you and I get to be the beneficiaries of life insurance tax-free, corporations basically enjoy the same privilege to a certain degree. And so you retain that tax-free cash of life insurance, like what it credited your corporation. And so at the end of the day, you now have given you've given the foundation whatever, call it $1 million worth of shares, and they've redeemed them for $1 million of cash, and you retain $1 million of the credit from your life insurance policy. So most individuals and corporations will take advantage of this strategy for the purpose of reducing tax, for being able to leave a legacy, for sort of being impactful and passing on wealth, without really impacting the next generation or the surviving shareholders. It really works well.
You go from a taxable asset to a tax-free asset when you get to put a claim in with the life insurance policy. It's a very, very powerful tool.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the one thing that's sort of missed for a lot of business owners who think they don't need life insurance. And most of these guys don't, obviously, right? But should they have it? Yeah, that's a different conversation. And how you use it is really dependent upon these types of conversations.
Often when we bring up life insurance as a strategy, when a client has an abundance of wealth, we'll have conversations with their accountant and lawyer to try to set all this up and make sure that we're doing everything right for the best outcome for the client. The accountant will say, well, you don't need life insurance. Well, we agree. You don't need life insurance, but you can make a hell of a difference if you do implement the proper insurance strategy.
Yeah.
So I know for me in marketing, there are times where we have a client and we do something to help them with their business or whatnot, and it literally changes their lives. Has there been one specific moment in your time doing this that you came home and were like, amazed at what you've accomplished for somebody else that in turn helped an organization or something that just made you, whether I'm not going to say brought you to tears, but just gave you that emotion of I'm doing something, like this is me giving to the world?
It happened pretty early in my career. And, I've been doing this for a number of years, because when I got into the business, I really thought it was sort of more about the beneficiaries. I started with that to say, hey, you know what? You got to make sure that family can eat and turn lights on and so on. I had a client who had a life insurance policy, and it was quite a sizable life insurance policy, corporately held, because he had large corporate debts when he had first started out. And time had gone by, corporate debts were no longer there. And his family had grown up. So there was really that traditional need for insurance wasn't there. And, we sat down, we looked at what he wants to do as far as his finances were concerned. And the insurance policy came up. In fact, actually, I didn't even sell the policies. I didn't even know it was there. But he said, listen, I have this policy. I want to get rid of it. And I said, well, listen, why don't you hold on to it for a bit? Because it really wasn't costing him anymore. It was making more money in that policy than he was spending.
Yeah.
It's tax-free. I mean, all the good reasons why it was there. 2 months later, he's diagnosed with brain cancer. He had just retired, by the way. So he was pretty young, and he was given a very short period of time to survive. Anyway, the services that he received from oncology in Montreal were outstanding. And every time I go in to see him, and I'd go and see his wife, and I met with him on a regular basis because they had things to tie up, she would not stop talking about how nice the services were, how he was comforted by the services that he got from the oncology department in Montreal. And so I sat down with him afterwards and I said, listen, you've got this life insurance policy. I said, what do you want to do with this money?
Yeah.
And, it makes you, when sort of death is at your door, you reflect on
For sure.
things in a little different way, right?
Getting back to the values, right? You're getting back to those values you're talking about.
Yeah. And so I had changed that beneficiary designation for the hospital. And the oncology department had written up a letter to him, basically a thank you, because he did this while he was alive and he did it specifically for them. And he did this as a thank you. And so it allowed him to thank them before he passed away. And it allowed him to receive that thank you back while he was still alive. He showed me that letter and he had tears in his eyes. He
Oh
said,
my God.
like, somehow I looked back and I thought, you didn't cry when I came in to see you after you found out, you had terminal brain cancer. And somehow this letter from the hospital made you cry. So that was kind of a turning point for me to realize the benefit, giving has on individuals.
Such a touching story.
Another hair-raising experience there.
No kidding.
Twice in one show, John. Thanks, man. I told you this guy was awesome.
I know. No kidding.
No, it's fun work. I got to be honest. And I think you might agree, René. I mean, we do this day in and day out because it's enjoyable, right?
Yeah. You know what? I talk about this a lot with our team is that we have a direct impact to the lives of the people we work with. And you see that you're having an impact. Man, it's so rewarding. It's amazing.
Yeah. And, until you're in the business, you maybe don't realize it as much. There's very few businesses that, your clients will invite you and tell you how impactful the work is that you do for them.
Yeah.
Everybody does a lot of good work. I get it. So you got to take joy in what you do. And really, I wouldn't think of anything else.
That's amazing.
You're the man, John. Thank you so much. And we want you to stick around for a little chat after this break. We'll be right back, guys.
If there's one piece of advice I can offer you, is to ask about transfer fees before making investment decisions. Trust me, they can be crazy expensive.
Always ask questions. #Call René, Certified Financial Planner of St. Cyr and Associates.
So one of my fondest memories is being in Montreal with John. He says, I got this place I got to take you to. So we end up going to this Chinese food joint that was on the second story of, I don't know, wherever it was. And Mr. John here introduced me to rattlesnake soup.
Oh, my.
And enjoyed it so much that I ordered a second bowl.
And by the way, I was there the last week and that same memory came up, by the way.
Really? Hey?
It did, yeah.
Well, there's two reasons why I ordered 2 bowls of rattlesnake soup is that, well, I really fucking liked it. But the second reason is Canada Life was flipping the bill.
You got to have 2 bowls. Yeah.
It was a $40 bowl of soup. So as I'm fucking taking advantage of this shit, it's coming out of John's wallet. But speaking of the cost of bowls of soup, Darryl brought an interesting topic to the table for us to chat about today is, the ever increasing cost of travel since the pandemic and this bloody inflation that everyone's talking about. And it's just, it's put a stick in the spokes for a lot of people that enjoy traveling.
Well, and that's the thing. You mentioned John was a traveler, and I think of how the landscape has changed. Like before, I know for me, when we plan trips, it's like we are planning the grandest of all grand trips. And now we're like, okay, so how much are meals there, right? It's like you got to take that in consideration. So as a traveler yourself, has your vision changed in the last few years of what travel looks like to you?
It's interesting because, you say now you have to take into account how much the meals cost because, people are charging for stuff they didn't charge for before. And that's the issue, right?
Yeah.
I go up to Timmins and great little hotel, tons of parking. All of a sudden I go in and they're charging me $25 a day to park. I mean, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like I could go across the street to the mall park. The street. And so he goes, well, I guess you haven't been here for a while. No, clearly I haven't been here for a while. But yeah, so that, I feel the same way. And I kind of look at, it's not necessarily just the travel. It's like, what are they nickel and diming you for along the way? Whether it's airlines saying, hey, you know what, if you want to bring on a computer bag, that's an extra $50, right? So you can take that into consideration.
Exactly.
But even the food piece, like you say, my brother Dan had traveled to Italy, and then I hear Portugal's amazing. I haven't been, But he's like, this year we're going to Portugal because the food's a lot cheaper and accommodations are cheaper and you're kind of in that same area. So we're looking for the same experience, but we're looking at doing it, with less out of pocket money. So choosing where to go with, like Darryl says, to the, cost of food. If you go to a region in Europe where food will be more affordable, you might not be going to the ideal place or the destination you were really aspiring to. You're making compromises because it's just so fucking expensive.
Yeah. And my research lately has been more about travel cost, right? The flights to get there. And in a lot of cases, when I look at Europe, for instance, a lot of the places actually aren't that much more expensive. Getting there is twice the cost, though.
No kidding.
Right. That's the issue, right? So I can still go to some places in Spain and to your point, René, in Portugal, that are still quite affordable. I mean, they've gone up slightly from where they were pre-pandemic, but the flight to get there has doubled, right? A couple of years ago, we were in Thailand. It was a 30-hour journey to get to Thailand.
Oh.
Stayed at the Sheraton. We were in Koh Samui, beautiful little island. And the whole thing for 2 weeks cost, I don't know, it was like about $5,000 for two of us.
Yeah.
Today, it's exactly double. And it's not the hotel, it's the airfare that's changed. So it's
for the
double
same
the cost.
experience.
Exact same experience. Right? So you go, okay, well, am I going to do it for $10,000? No, I wouldn't.
Well, I do live vicariously through you, through your social media presence, and I do see you in kayaks and canoes from time to time. Could you not just canoe across the ocean and save yourself the flight?
Don't think I
You're pretty fit. You're pretty fit to do it.
Yeah. Don't think. It was funny because we were just down, René, as you know, we were in Las Vegas and down at Hoover Dam. I look at the waterway and the Grand Canyon, and we're going, wow, we could rent a boat. I'm thinking, rent a boat. The cost of renting a boat, I'd probably take my own.
Yeah.
How do I get a canoe from Ottawa down to the Grand Canyon? Right?
Yeah. Well, you know what? If they're charging you $50 for your laptop, they're going to charge you more than that to board your kayak or canoe. So you might have to drive down. But
Yeah. I think what worries me a little bit is how many of us are actually not traveling and not relaxing as much through vacation. Right?
Yeah.
That's the issue.
That's a good point because I haven't vacationed in forever, to be honest with you.
Same. And I agree with you. I've looked up, destinations, and you're right. It's like the flight is the part that kills you, which now I'm starting to realize why people fly Spirit Airlines or Sunwing.
Yeah. It just, the flight used to be the experience.
Yeah.
And if, you see some of those old photos, right, of people getting served with china and silverware and all. And now, my God, if they throw a packet of crackers at you, you feel like you won the lottery.
It's so true.
Pretzels. Air Canada pretzels.
I'm flying this airline because I get pretzels versus this one I have to pay for them. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right?
But you know what? Factor it into the price and smoosh people, and you're going to get a lot more reaction, I think. Like, I love flying Porter when I fly Timmins to Toronto because they give me a free glass of wine. Like, I don't care if I pay 3 times more, but it just feels nice.
Exactly.
It does. Really. And how many people are going to have a glass? It's going to work out in the wash by the end of the day. Somebody's not going to have one. You're going to have 2. Whatever.
Yeah. What's always been interesting with our country is the cost of traveling domestically is crazy.
I don't get it.
Like Megan and I go back home to BC and check up on things for a couple of weeks. Our flights are as much as an all-inclusive to the Caribbean. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
There's no fucking rhyme or reason there. It makes no sense.
Yeah, it's out of whack. It's out of whack. So, I mean, the airlines, I guess, will say, well, it's the taxes or it's the gas fees or it's whatever.
Yeah.
I don't care what it is. It wasn't there pre-pandemic, right?
When I buy a ticket with Air Canada, I feel like I'm doing planned giving.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, with no values.
With no value.
Exactly. Giving my whole generational wealth to Air Canada just to get to Nova Scotia.
and they still make you feel thankful you're even on the plane.
Exactly. Yeah. I have to thank them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks, pilot, for landing the plane. I'm pretty sure he wanted to land that plane safely just as bad as I did. Pretty sure he didn't want to die either.
But I mean, do you guys find you're not traveling as much as you used to? Or is it just me?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no.
I hope it's not coincidence for me. Because what's happened is, like, so Megan and I had a trip to Italy booked like 2 weeks before the pandemic in March struck. And then, we just kind of sat tight. And then, of course, our flights were canceled. We weren't allowed to travel. And then you just get fucking tied up and being stupid busy. And then we bought this building, right? So I'm blaming it on this 2-year project that I've been committed to, but I almost feel like coming to an end now, and we're still not planning a trip because we're just too busy.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's almost unexplainable, because why are we any busier now that we don't have time to travel?
I mean, for me, one of the other issues is the reliability. Like, to be able to say, you know what, why don't we take off this weekend and we'll come back Sunday and we'll all be back at work on Monday, and where you
Yeah.
go. The reliability, the chances you're ever going to get back on Sunday now, like,
Oh,
I
no
almost,
kidding.
I look at it and I go, I can't take the chance.
Yeah, it's so true.
And where do you think that pivoting point's going to be that we can start to rely on things again? It seems like there's no end in sight.
Air Canada, what are they? They're about the worst right now, right?
Yeah.
In the industry is for reliability.
Yeah.
And you know what they'll say is, listen, we came out of COVID. We had
Oh.
fired all these people.
Yeah,
And now we had
yeah.
to hire people with absolutely no experience. Okay. Well, if you had to, then so did Air France, and so
Yeah,
did Delta, and so did
exactly.
everybody else, right?
Yeah, it's easy to blame the pandemic, and I feel like we're going to be doing that for the next 50 years.
That's a good point. Yeah. At one point, is that not even, it's worked its way through the wash? I don't know.
Exactly. So where's your next trip, John?
I don't know. I'm thinking about going out and seeing René. René, I mean,
there you go.
That's not a vacation.
Yeah, trust me, I've done it. It's not a great one. It's like flying Air Canada.
I was with another buddy of yours, and he found out that you and I worked together, and he said, "Hey, have you gone for dinner?" So we had these great stories about that. So
Yeah.
no, I don't really have any. And funny enough, now the travel seems to be kind of within Canada. To be honest with you,
Yeah.
I've got one son who's living in Halifax, so I
Oh,
look at
nice.
trips out there, and then I've got a daughter who lives in Guelph, so that's the extent of vacations, right?
Yeah, yeah.
When you talk about reliability, though, something comes to mind is the complexities of living in the North and enjoying traveling. It's a gamble, right? It's like Russian roulette at this point. So we often just say, fuck it. Like you say, we're not going to take a chance. I never really put much thought into it until I heard you say it.
I don't know how long I've been flying for. I mean, and certainly in this job for a good 15 years. And yet last year, for the first time ever, I slept at Pearson twice.
Crazy.
Really? I mean, it's ridiculous. And you look
Yeah.
around, you go, why are all these people here?
I
Well,
know.
you know what? I'll tell you why, because they're all flying Air Canada. But, there should not be people sleeping in an airport.
No,
But
exactly.
it's the reliability issue. And so when people say now, hey, can you come up, help me work on a case, whatever, in Sault Ste. Marie, before I would have said, yeah, no problem. I'll see you this afternoon. Now I can't make that guarantee. So I say, unfortunately, I can't do it because I can't guarantee I'm going to be back.
Just to be clear, though, the last time I slept in an airport, it wasn't because the flights were delayed. It's because I had terrible food poisoning last fall in Orlando. And I had to get out of my wheelchair because they were wheeling me through the airport, and I needed a nap because I was dead to the world. So I was cuddled up in the corner, sucking my thumb, wishing I was dead. It was definitely not Air Canada's fault that day.
That's where you need a seatbelt on the toilet in the plane because you're going to be there for a while.
That's right. That's right. Isn't that what they call preferred seating?
That's right.
At least on Air Canada. Listen, John, thanks for joining us today. You've given us crazy amount of insight, which I appreciate, and I can guarantee everyone else does as well.
Yeah, thanks again for joining us, John. You've got a lifetime of knowledge and experience in this industry, and we really appreciate you.
Well, I can't thank you guys enough for the invite. You're always a joy to listen to, and to be a part of it is a real highlight for me. So thanks for the invite.
Awesome, man. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
We'll see you guys next time. Take care.